There is a specific smell to obsolescence. It is a mixture of damp concrete, mildew, and the lingering, ghostly scent of industrial solvent that seems to weep from the pores of my skin, even after 20 years of retirement. I sat at the wobbly laminate table in the basement apartment that was supposed to be a temporary solution, but had become my tomb. I am Arthur. I am 79 years old. My hands, once steady enough to replicate the hairline fracture of a 17th century woodblock print with a single stroke of a brush, are now gnarled knots of arthritis and age. They rested on the cold table, twitching slightly, a neurological reminder that the body fails long before the mind surrenders. I stared at the black ink stain under my fingernail. It was the only thing I had left of my former life. I used to be a master printer. I didn't just put ink on paper. I forged reality. I created facsimiles of rare manuscripts for museums that wanted to display a copy while the original slept in a climate-controlled vault. I understood the weight of paper, the tooth of the fiber, the way light hit a foil stamp. I was an artist of duplication. Now I was just a tenant in the home I had built with my own sweat and mortgage payments. The voice cut through the damp air like a serrated knife. I looked up. Beverly stood in the doorway. She didn't come in. She never came all the way in anymore, as if the poverty of the basement might infect her designer clothes. She was 60, glowing with the artificial vitality of expensive creams and the blood of a man she had bled dry. She was wearing a fur coat, mink, vintage, bought in 1995 when business was booming, that looked obscene against the peeling paint of the doorframe. "I am listening, Beverly," I said. My voice was rough, like gravel tumbling in a dryer. "Good," she snapped, checking her manicure. Her nails were a blood-red gel, sharp enough to tear flesh, "because we need to talk about next month." "I don't need a social worker," I said, staring at her nails. "I need my pension check." "We use that for the upkeep, Arthur," she sighed, a dramatic exhalation that suggested I was an unbearable burden. "Heating this big house isn't free. And Jax needs the temperature higher for his muscles." Jax, a man who was 35, built like a vending machine, and currently sleeping in the master bedroom where I had fathered our son. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a brochure.
She tossed it onto the table. It slid across the laminate and stopped near my hand. Shady Pines Assisted Living. Dignity in your golden years. "I drove past it yesterday," she said, her tone brightening with fake enthusiasm. "It's lovely, Arthur. They have a garden, they have bingo on Tuesdays. It's structured." "I have a home," I said quietly. "It's not safe," she countered, her eyes cold. "You leave the stove on." "I haven't cooked in 6 months because you took the hot plate," I reminded her. "I said so," she said, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're confused. You're combative. It's the dementia talking." I felt a heat rise in my chest, a burning ember of the man I used to be. She had used my heart attack 2 years ago as the pretext to seize control. I had signed the papers in the ICU, thinking she was saving our assets. I didn't know she was seizing them. "I want my printing press back," I said suddenly. It was a non sequitur, but it was the wound that wouldn't heal. The Heidelberg. Beverly's face went blank, then smoothed into a mask of pitying condescension. "Oh, Arthur, we sold that months ago. It was just clutter." The air left the room. My Heidelberg. The machine I had restored by hand. The machine that had paid for this house, for her car, for our son's tuition. "You?" I whispered. "We got scrap value for it," she shrugged. "It barely covered the landscaping bill. Jax wanted a Zen garden in the back. It looks beautiful, Arthur." She had melted down my life's work to plant bamboo for her lover. The grief was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. But beneath the grief, the gears began to turn. The intricate, mechanical gears of a man who spent 50 years understanding how to construct a perfect forgery. You don't just copy the image, you copy the soul of the document. You have to understand the flaw to recreate the perfection. Beverly checked her watch. "I have to go. Jax is waiting for his protein shake." She dropped a crumpled envelope onto the table. It was stamped with red ink, past due. "It's for that storage unit on 5th, she sneered. "I didn't know you had it. Whatever is in there, get
Get rid of it. I'm cutting off your allowance next week to pay the deposit at Shady Pines." She turned to leave. She grabbed the door handle. "Pay it or empty it, Arthur," she said over her shoulder. She slammed the door. The vibration traveled through the cheap table.
It shook the small framed photo of my mother that I kept near my cot. The frame toppled over, landing face down on the formica with a sharp clack. I stared at the back of the photo frame, listening to the click of her heels fading down the hallway, the sound of a woman walking away with the last shreds of my dignity. She thought she had taken everything. She thought I was just a confused old man waiting to die in a room that smelled of bleach and urine. But if you've ever been pushed into a corner by the person who promised to love you until the end, hit that subscribe button. Because Beverly forgot one thing. I spent 40 years making paper lie, and I had one final masterpiece left in me. I picked up the overdue notice. My hand stopped shaking. The storage unit on 5th. She didn't know what was inside. She thought it was old clothes or furniture. She didn't know it was my backup. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of the front door upstairs, followed by the roar of her Mercedes engine. I stood up. My knees popped, but I ignored the pain. I put on my coat. I walked out of the basement into the cold, gray light of the afternoon. The walk to the storage unit took me 40 minutes. I had to stop twice to catch my breath, leaning against brick walls, feeling the flutter of my own heart. But I kept moving. I keyed the code into the gate. I unlocked the rolling metal door of Unit 404. It rolled up with a screech that sounded like music. Inside, it was freezing, but it smelled right. It smelled of ink and oil. My Heidelberg was gone, yes, but I had never trusted Beverly completely. Even 10 years ago, I had kept a reserve. Sitting on the concrete floor, covered in a tarp, was my digital setup, a high-resolution drum scanner, a commercial-grade laser printer modified for heavy cardstock, boxes of specialty papers, linen, cotton, foil-lined, and my tools, the burnishers, the loops, the bottles of chemical compounds I used to age paper. I wasn't senile. I was precise. I closed the door, locking myself in with a battery-operated lantern. I sat down at the small workbench. I cracked my knuckles. I wasn't going to forge a check. That leaves a digital trail. Checks are traceable. Checks get you arrested. I was going to forge a dream. I pulled out a fresh sheet of 300 GSM cardstock. It had the right weight, the right snap when you flicked it. I opened the laptop. I didn't connect to the internet. I didn't need to. I had the templates saved. I began to design.
The Mega State Jubilee, I whispered to the empty room. It was the biggest lottery in the state. The drawing was last night. The numbers were in the paper this morning. I had memorized them. 04, 12, 28, 35, 42. Powerball, 09. $4 million, a lump sum payout. I started with the background, a complex guilloche pattern, those intricate spirograph-like waves you see on banknotes to prevent photocopying. I layered them in cyan and magenta, setting the opacity to 15%. To the naked eye, it just looked like a secure document. To a scanner, it was a nightmare. I added the state seal. I added the barcode. The barcode was the trick. If you scan a real lottery ticket, it talks to the state's central server. I couldn't hack the server, but Beverly wouldn't scan it, not at first. She was analog. She was greedy. She would look at the numbers. I printed the base layer. The printer hummed, a warm, rhythmic sound. The cardstock emerged. It looked official, but it was naked. It needed the scratch-off layer. This was the art. I mixed the compound in a small glass jar, silver acrylic paint, a drop of dish soap. The soap breaks the polymer bonds in the acrylic, making it flake off when scratched instead of peeling like a skin. It was a trick I learned from a counterfeiter in Jersey 30 years ago. I painted the strip over the winning numbers. I applied it carefully, ensuring the edges were jagged and imperfect, just like the mass-produced ones. I let it dry. I applied a second coat. Then, the final touch. I used a microstamp to imprint the void if removed code along the bottom edge. It took me 3 days. I slept on the floor of the storage unit, wrapped in a tarp. I ate vending machine crackers. My eyes burned. My back seized up so badly I had to crawl to the printer to retrieve the final proof.
but when I held it under the magnifying lamp on the third morning, it was perfect. It looked heavy, it felt authentic, it smelled like hope. It was a ticket worth $4 million, or, more accurately, it was a piece of painted cardboard worth absolutely nothing. Now, the delivery. I couldn't give it to her. If I gave it to her, she would be suspicious. Generosity was suspicious in our war. She had to steal it. She had to believe she was taking something I didn't deserve. I placed the ticket inside a plain white envelope. I typed a label on my old typewriter. Urgent, winner notification, document enclosed. I didn't seal it. I left the flap tucked in.
I walked back to the house. It was Friday morning, the day Beverly came to take the car. She had told me last week, "I'm selling the Buick, Arthur. It's an eyesore in the driveway. Jax needs the garage space for his free weights." The Buick was a 2005 LeSabre. It was the last thing I owned that had my name on the title, though she had the signed transfer form ready. I walked to the driveway. The car was unlocked. It always was. The lock actuator was broken. I placed the envelope on the dashboard, right above the steering wheel. I placed it so the edge of the ticket was just visible, the colorful Mega State logo peeking out. Then I went downstairs to the basement. I pulled the blinds down on the small ground-level window, leaving a 1-inch crack. I waited. At 10 a.m., the front door opened. Beverly walked out. She was wearing sunglasses and holding a cup of coffee. She was on the phone. "No, I told the dealer I'd have it there by noon," she was saying. "Yeah, it's a piece of junk, but we'll get a few hundred for it." She walked to the Buick. She yanked the door open. She sat in the driver's seat. I watched through the blinds. My breath fogged the glass. She threw her purse on the passenger seat. She put the key in the ignition. Then she paused. She saw the envelope. She frowned. She picked it up. I saw her lips move as she read the label. Urgent, winner notification. She looked at the house. She looked at the basement window. I stayed perfectly still. She opened the envelope. She pulled out the ticket. I saw her body stiffen. Even from 20 feet away, I saw the electrical jolt that went through her spine. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a coin. She started to scratch. Her movements were frantic, feverish. Her elbow jerked back and forth. She stopped. She brought the ticket closer to her face. She pulled down her sunglasses. She looked at the ticket. Then she pulled her phone out. She tapped the screen, checking the numbers. She froze. She looked at the house again. A look of pure, predatory panic crossed her face. She realized what she held. She thought I had won. She thought the senile old man in the basement had just become a millionaire and didn't know it yet. If she came inside, if she told me, I would have the money. I could fight her. I could hire lawyers. I could kick her out. She made a decision in a split second. She shoved the ticket down the front of her blouse, into her bra.
She looked around the street to see if anyone had watched her. She didn't come back inside to yell at me about the car. She didn't come to say goodbye. She started the Buick. The engine coughed and roared to life. She threw it into reverse. She peeled out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the asphalt, leaving black marks on the pavement she was so proud of. She sped down the street, disappearing around the corner. She thought she just stole $4 million from the man she was evicting. She thought she had won the war. She thought she was driving toward a new life. I stood up from the window. My knees hurt, but my heart was light. She had no idea she just pulled the pin on a grenade. I walked to the table and picked up the phone. I called my son, David. He hadn't spoken to his mother in 5 years, not since she brought Jax home. I said, "Dad, it's better than okay," I said. "Do you have time to pick me up?" he asked, hearing the smile in my voice. I gave her exactly what she wanted, I said. There is a specific frequency to silence when it is about to shatter. It hums, low and menacing, like the capacitor of a flashbulb charging before the blinding light. I sat in the corner booth of the Rusty Spoon, a diner 3 blocks from the library where I spent my mornings pretending to read the paper so I didn't have to look at the damp walls of my basement apartment. I was nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. It cost $2.50, a sum that I now had to budget for, but the warmth of the booth was free. On the wall above the counter, the local news was playing on mute. The chyron scrolled in an endless loop of traffic accidents and weather warnings. But the real news wasn't on TV. It was in my pocket. It was vibrating against my thigh with the relentless rhythm of a disaster unfolding in real time. My son, David, had been calling me for an hour. I picked up the phone. The screen was cracked, a spider web of glass over the digital display. "Hello, David," I said. My voice was calm, the steady anchor in the coming storm.
"Dad," David said, his voice breathless, sounding like he was running. "Dad, tell me you've seen it?" "You know I don't use Facebook, son," I said, taking a sip of the cold sludge. "You need to see this," David insisted. Dad, she's spiraling. It's gone viral. The local community page is blowing up. Of her quitting," David said. "But..."
Dad, she didn't just quit. I hung up. I opened the app on my phone, navigating with stiff, arthritic fingers. I found her profile. It wasn't hard. It was the top post in my feed, shared by 40 people already. I pressed play. The video opened with a shaky, vertical angle. Beverly was holding the phone selfie style. She was standing in the middle of the open plan office at Prestige Realty, the firm where she had worked as a mid-level agent for 20 years. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide and manic, glittering with the dopamine hit of perceived invincibility. She wasn't wearing her usual beige blazer. She was wearing the mink coat she had worn to my basement, thrown over a gold sequin dress that looked like it belonged in a nightclub, not a Tuesday morning staff meeting. Beverly shouted in the video, spinning the camera to show her stunned colleagues sitting in their cubicles. "Listen up!" She walked. No, she strutted toward the glass-walled office at the back, the office of Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, a man she had complained about every night at dinner for 2 decades. She kicked the door open. Bang! Henderson looked up, startled, dropping his pen. "What is it?" he asked, visible in the background. Beverly screamed, laughing a high, shrill sound that distorted the microphone. She climbed up onto his mahogany desk. She actually climbed onto the desk in her heels, knocking over a framed photo of his wife. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a bottle of Dom Perignon. She shrieked, popping the cork. It flew across the room and hit the drywall. Foam sprayed over Henderson's suit. "I am rich. I hit the big one." She took a swig from the bottle, letting the champagne run down her chin. "You are a thief," she yelled, pointing the bottle at him like a weapon. "You steal commissions. I know about the Johnson account. I know you skimmed the top." She jumped down from the desk, landing awkwardly but recovering with a stumble. She turned the camera back to her face. "Get the office out of my life," she screamed into the lens. The video ended. I sat in the diner, staring at the black screen of my phone. The silence around me felt heavy, charged. She hadn't just quit. She had committed professional suicide. She had slandered her boss, admitted to knowing about fraud, which implicated her, and burned a bridge she had spent 20 years building. And she had done it all based on a piece of cardboard I had printed in a freezing storage unit. My phone buzzed again.
It wasn't a call this time. It was an alert. My banking app. I had kept my name on the joint credit card account, the Platinum card with a $50,000 limit. She had demanded I keep it open to build credit for the estate, threatening to stop my allowance if I closed it. I had alerts set for any transaction over $500. Ping. Transaction authorized, Bali Paradise Resorts, 00. Ping. Transaction authorized, Mercedes-Benz of Greenwich, 00. Deposit. Ping. Transaction authorized, Louis Vuitton, 00. I watched the notifications stack up on my screen like Tetris blocks. She was spending money she didn't have. She was leveraging a future that didn't exist. She believed the ticket was real because she needs it to be real. Her greed had blinded her to the mechanics of the lottery. Any rational person would have taken the ticket to the commission office first. They would have validated it. They would have gotten the check. But Beverly wasn't rational. She was a narcissist who had been starving for glory. The scratch-off was all the proof she needed. In her mind, the money was already in the bank. She was spending the potential, not the reality. I took another sip of my cold coffee. It tasted like justice. For 48 hours, I stayed in the shadows. I watched her digital footprint expand. She posted photos of new luggage. Then, the invitation came. It was a text message. Short, brutal. "Beverly, dinner at the house, 7 p.m. Come collect your things from the basement. I'm turning it into a wine cellar." She invited me, not to share the news, not to apologize. She invited me to gloat. She wanted an audience for her final act of cruelty. She wanted to see my face when she told me she was leaving the country and kicking me onto the street. She wanted to twist the knife one last time. I put on my best suit. It was 10 years old, a little frayed at the cuts, but I pressed it myself with the iron in the basement. I polished my shoes. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a craftsman who was about to unveil his masterpiece. I took the bus to the house.
My house. The driveway was full. There were cars I didn't recognize. A shiny new convertible, likely the rental she had put on the credit card, was parked prominently in the center. I walked up the path. The front door was open. Music was blaring, something loud and bass-heavy that rattled the stained-glass windows I had restored in 1985. I stepped inside. The house was transformed.
It was filled with gold balloons. A catered buffet was set up on the dining table where we used to eat Sunday roast. Beverly stood in the center of the living room. She was wearing a gold dress that matched the balloons, tight and shimmering. She looked manic. Her eyes were darting around the room, feeding on the envy of her friends, people I barely recognized. Hangers-on from the gym, former colleagues she had invited just to humiliate. Jax was by her side. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, and on his wrist was a Rolex Submariner that gleamed under the chandelier. He had a proprietary hand on Beverly's waist, but his eyes were on the buffet. "Beverly!" she shrieked when she saw me. The room quieted. The music seemed to dip. "You made it!" A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. "I wouldn't miss this, Beverly," I said quietly. She threw her head back and laughed. "Oh, Arthur, I don't have news." She clapped her hands. "Everyone, gather round." She reached into her cleavage, the same place she had shoved the envelope 2 days ago, and pulled out the ticket. It was crumpled, warm, and stained with sweat. She pointed a manicured finger at me, but the universe corrects its mistakes. I bought a ticket. Liar, she stole it. She screamed. I hit the jackpot. 4 million. The room erupted. People cheered. Champagne corks popped. Jax kissed her cheek, grinning like a shark who just smelled blood in the water. She shouted over the noise, "First class!" She turned to me, her face twisted into a sneer of pure triumph. "I'm moving you to the state facility tomorrow morning. I need the basement for storage. The movers are coming at 8 a.m. This was the moment. The ink was dry. The press was set. I stepped forward. I didn't shout. I didn't get angry. I spoke with the quiet, measured authority of a man who knows exactly where the margin line sits on a page. "Beverly," I said. The room didn't quiet down immediately. "Beverly," I said again, louder this time. She looked at me, annoyed. "What? Don't be a sore loser, Arthur." "You might want to check the serial number," I said. She frowned. "The serial number on the back of the ticket," I said, "down at the bottom." Jack scoffed, sipping his champagne. "It's a winner, old man." "I know the numbers," I said. "I picked them, but the serial number." Beverly rolled her eyes. "Fine." She flipped the ticket over. She squinted at the tiny black numbers printed along the bottom edge. 06, 12. 1980, she read aloud. She paused. She looked up, her brow furrowed. I asked. The room went quiet. The guests sensed the shift in the air. The static of the flashbulb was building. 06/12/1980, she whispered. "That's our wedding anniversary," I said. The color drained from her face. It started at her hairline and washed down her neck, leaving her looking gray and pasty under the heavy makeup. She breathed. "And the barcode," I continued, taking a step closer. "The square QR code next to it." I pointed to the phone in Jax's hand. "Scan it, Jax," I said. "Use the official app." Jax looked at me, then at Beverly. He looked confused. He pulled out his phone. He opened a lottery app. "Don't," Beverly whispered, clutching the ticket to her chest. A dawn of horror was breaking in her eyes. "Scan it," I commanded. Jax held the phone up. He aligned the camera with the ticket in Beverly's shaking hand. The phone chirped. A loud, dissonant buzz sound echoed through the silent living room. A robotic voice from the phone announced, "Invalid ticket. Product SKU, whole wheat bread." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. It pressed against the eardrums. It sucked the oxygen out of the room. Beverly looked at the ticket. She rubbed her thumb over the scratch-off latex. It flaked away, revealing the silver paint I had mixed with dish soap in the storage unit.
she whispered. Her voice was trembling so hard the words shattered. You. I made a replica, I corrected her. My voice was calm, precise. I used a Heidelberg press, 300 GSM cardstock, and a guilloche pattern I designed myself. I looked around the room at the guests who were now backing away, putting their glasses down on tables. You stole it, I said. You stole mail addressed to me from my car. You opened it. You assumed it was real because you are so blinded by greed you didn't check the security weave. I paused, letting the weight of the actions sink in. Then you quit your job, I listed, counting on my ink-stained fingers. You publicly humiliated your boss on the internet. You insulted your colleagues. No, she gasped. I asked. Non-refundable. The luggage? Monogrammed. Non-returnable. I looked at Jax. Jax looked down at the watch on his wrist. He looked at Beverly, who was now trembling like a leaf in a gale. You said it was real, Jax said, his voice dangerous. Beverly shrieked. He tricked me.
I put a piece of paper on the dashboard of my car, I said. Jax began to unbuckle the watch. I'm out. Beverly grabbed his arm. We can fix this. Jax shook her off. For forging a fake ticket you stole? He placed the watch on the buffet table next to the shrimp. He walked out the front door without looking back. The guests followed. They evaporated like mist. No one wanted to be near the blast zone. Beverly stood alone in the center of the room, clutching the worthless piece of cardstock. She looked at me. Her face crumbled. The arrogance, the vitality, the cruelty, it all dissolved, leaving behind a terrified, ruined woman in a gold dress she couldn't afford. Arthur, she whimpered, my job. You have a lot of work to do, I said. I turned around. I walked toward the door. Shh, she screamed, the sound tearing out of her throat, a primal cry of total collapse. You can't leave me here. I stopped at the threshold. I looked back at the house I had built, the house she had turned into a monument to her own ego. I'm going to the diner, I said. I can afford a coffee now. I walked out. I walked down the driveway, past the new convertible that would be repossessed by Monday. At the end of the driveway, a car was idling, a sensible 4-door sedan. My son, David, was behind the wheel. He rolled down the window. He was smiling, a genuine, wide smile I hadn't seen in years. In? He asked. I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The seat was warm. Hook, line, and sinker, I said. David laughed. He put the car in gear. We drove away. I didn't look back at the house. I was still poor. I still lived in a basement apartment that smelled of damp concrete. I had no fortune. But as I watched the streetlights blur past, I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in a decade. I had my dignity. I had my son. And I knew that back in that big, empty house, the ink was finally dry on the last chapter of our marriage. I didn't win the lottery, but as we turned onto the main road, heading toward a future that belonged only to me, I knew I had won something far more valuable. I had won my freedom.